Good evening. This is Robert Sungenis coming to you from the Principal Facebook page. The program is the open question program for October 17th, 2019. And I am here to take your questions about science, philosophy, cosmology, cosmogony, creation, evolution, geocentrism, heliocentrism, anything related to those topics. I will endeavor to answer your questions or comments from the Bible, the teaching of the church, the tradition of the church, and not least of all, the scientific data. So, this program is set aside for you every Thursday on the Principal Facebook page, and some people I have given authority to put it on YouTube as well. So you can find recorded programs there. And we go from at least 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 8 o'clock, sometimes beyond 8 o'clock, depending on the amount of questions that we get and the depth that I cover them. For those of you not familiar with the Principal, the Facebook page, or our movie, The Principal, that came out in theaters in 2014, October, this month, so it's our 5-year anniversary. The movie is a 90-minute documentary about basically the Earth being in the center of the universe. Can you imagine that? And we say that with no shame, because the scientific data that we have accumulated for the past 50 to 100 years all dictates that the Earth is in the center of the universe. Coincidentally, just like the Bible says, and what the church has taught for 2,000 years, and our fathers and medievals and philosophers and theologians who were faithful to the Catholic Church all said the same thing. And now we are finding, toward the end of the second millennium, the beginning of the third millennium, that we have enough instruments, sophisticated enough to gather enough information to show us that indeed the Earth is the center. And not only the center, but not moving at all. The universe is revolving around us on a daily basis. And some of us today, our moderns, would look at us cross-eyed and wonder if we just got out of the loony bin, of course. But you know, before Copernicus and Galileo and Newton, you were considered a fool for believing that the Earth revolved around the sun. And now things have switched over. You're considered a fool if you believe that the sun goes around the Earth. The sun and the stars go around the Earth. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that the nature of the beast is relative, you see. And that's pretty much where modern science has come. The highest science we know in physics today is relativity. And relativity says by the own nature of its teachings and its equations, that either the Earth is rotating in a fixed universe, or the universe is rotating around a fixed Earth. Either one can be true according to the general principle of relativity. Now, Einstein was famous for inventing the general theory of relativity, and that overlaps with the general principle of relativity. Einstein went on to add things to his general relativity theory that are not in the general principle of relativity, like black holes and wormholes and things like that. But the general principle of relativity is basically the way that science has come full circle, so to speak. Full circle. And there's no way for them to avoid it. But since they don't like it, they don't like the implications of their own general principle of relativity, that means they're not going to advertise the other side of the coin. Only one side of the coin. The side that they like, the side that they prefer. The side that says that the Earth is out in the remote recesses of space. It's nowhere near the center, if we even have a center. As a matter of fact, they all claim that there is no center. And it could be the furthest thing away from the sun and the stars revolving around a fixed Earth, you see. That's the side they like to promote. You won't hear anybody, hardly anyone. You do find a few. And the few that say it, I've put in my books and quote them verbatim. They've realized it. They've admitted it. And for every 100 scientists, you may get one that will tell you the other side of the story. And the fact is, if there's just a few, it doesn't make any difference. It could be a few or 100. The fact is that they are telling the truth when they say that the other side of the coin is that the Earth is fixed and the universe is revolving around it. The implications of relativity allow no escape from that conclusion, you see. And then after we know that, then it's just a matter of deciding which one of those two is true, since both are plausible and viable, okay? And so that's what the principle starts out to do. It starts by looking at the scientific evidence from the cosmic microwave background radiation. It's called background radiation, but we just like to call it the cosmic microwave radiation. And show that if it's looked at correctly and without bias, without favoritism, just objectively, it shows that the Earth is in the center, in the very center, and that the cosmic microwave radiation makes axes that go right through the Earth's equinox and ecliptic, like an X. So if that's not the center, then what could be, okay? So this is what scientists are stuck with, and they have no answer to it, basically. It's an anomaly in their understanding of the Big Bang Theory, because the cosmic microwave radiation should be isotropic, smooth, but it's not. And to a sufficient enough degree that we can see an axis going right through the Earth from one end of the universe to the other. That's astounding. Probably one of the most astounding things we have found in our study of the universe in the last 100, 200 years or longer. There's other things like the formation of galaxies, how the galaxies are situated. With respect to the Earth, they are in concentric circles around the Earth. That's another thing we cover in the movie, the principle. Things like that, they're all available to read in our books. First of all, let me get the DVD and show you that. In case you haven't got it yet, you should get it. And there it is, the DVD, $14.95. You can get it in Blu-ray as well for $19.95. You can also download it from our website, and the website is theprinciplemovie.com. You can also stream it as well. Okay, so there you go. And the sequel to that movie is Journey to the Center of the Universe. 4.5 hours. So it's 3 hours longer than the principal. And we get into all the details that the principal couldn't cover because it was a theatrical release and it could only be around 90 minutes. So not much you can cover there. And we did our best, however. So those two are available on the principal website and Facebook page. And we also have a book I just wrote called Geocentrism for Dumpskis and Smart Kids. Getting a lot of glare on that. So there's the only place I'm not getting glare. I trim these lights as much as I can and I still get glare from them. So I don't know how that happens, but there you are. We also have a CD that's available that has 60 plus animations, okay? Animations of a geocentric versus heliocentric universe. All your questions that you could possibly think of are answered in both this book and the CD. And we also have Geocentrism 101, and that is available. And with that, you get the CD free. So, go to the website you want to go to there to get those books and the Journey to the Center of the Universe is journeytothecenteroftheuniverse.com. Okay, very simple. So, all right, let's see what kind of questions we have today. Adam says, what is the biggest problem with radiometric dating? How predictable are their dates? How often do they get anomalous dates? And can we get any bearing on the age of the Earth using radioisotopes? Or is this a completely useless method? Thank you kindly. All right, so some sophisticated questions we have right off the bat here. Thank you, Adam. I'll try my best with that. By the way, I deal with radiometric dating in my new book, Scientific Heresies. Now that, let me see if I have that here. Where did I put that? I know I have it. I just can't remember where I put it. Anyway, that is available for you. I think there's about 500 pages there. And now I deal with a lot of other things than just radiometric dating. Okay. So if you want a comprehensive, detailed answer to that question, I would suggest you get that book. It comes in paperback and hardback. Okay. And you can basically, all the questions, all the objections are looked at in that book in a separate chapter. So you can have that. And this is an important question because, if the half-lives of are true that they assign to these, decaying isotopes, then the world has to be older than, 10,000 years old. It has to be, billions of years old. But as Adam implied in his question, what's the biggest problem with radiometric dating? That means he already knows there's problems with it. So he wants to know what the biggest one is. The biggest one is that you get fluctuating dating. Okay, you get fluctuating dates for the same method every time you use the same method. Well, like say take potassium to argon, potassium decaying to argon. Every time you take a date with potassium going to argon, you get a different date. You get a different time of the same sample. Okay, so right away we know something's wrong with this thing. And so that entails that you're going to have to investigate, well, why are we getting that anomalous recording of dates? And so you go in and you examine it, and what you find is that the whole thing is built on assumptions. and assumptions that are created by the mindset that you come to the problem with. And the mindset that I'm talking about is that if you already have discounted the idea that the earth can be no longer in existence than 6,000 to 7,000 years, if you've already discounted that, okay, and you are left with trying to support your theory of where we came from, and you need long periods of time and you need a lot of chance that goes your way, okay, you're talking, you need billions and billions of years. Even that's not going to do it, but it looks like it does it to the public, because as soon as the public sees, billions and billions of years, it's like, I can't even, remember what I did yesterday, let alone, trying to figure out how long a billion years is. And so you throw this out to the public and everybody's impressed. Oh, billions. Yeah, anything can happen in billions and billions of years, you see. And not only do you need that, but you need the development to keep progressing so that you get to this point where you have biological beings that come from inert, inorganic matter. Okay? So again, you throw the billions of years out there and everybody starts thinking it's possible because you've attached billions of years to it. And no, you could attach trillions, quadrillions, quintillions, sextillions, septillions, octillions, nonillions of years, and it's not going to make a darn bit of difference. Okay? Even though it sounds impressive to the public. But they can't make it too long, of course, because then the public would start scratching their heads even more. Well, what's septillion years? That can't be. So, they try to trim it down as much as they can. They've got it down to where they think enough time and chance could happen in 13.78 billion years. Okay. So if you go into the study of radiometry from that vantage point, wherein you must have billions of years, otherwise your whole understanding of the world, of philosophy, of why we're here, where we came from, just falls apart, you see, because if it's not true, then you're forced back to the Bible, which only gives you 6,000 or 7,000 years. Okay? And remember that quote that I quoted from Lewontin, who's a teacher of evolution at Harvard. And he says, look, we know that our theories don't work. Our evolutionary theories don't work. But the only alternative is six-day creationism. And we have resolved in our minds not to let a divine foot in the door. All right, so that just tells you. That's what I'm talking about when I say mindset. All right, so you've already figured that you're not going to let God be any part. And that's what science is today. Science is defined as trying to find an explanation for where things came from and how they operate without resorting to a supreme being. Okay, that's where, so it's a dead end from the start. It starts out with the wrong premise and foundation, and it's going to end up at a dead end, inevitably. Okay, and so what they'll do is they'll create scenarios that seem godlike, like the multiverse, for example. Because somebody would ask, well, where does the Big Bang come from? It doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you're claiming that something occurred, well, then what initiated it? Where did the material come to cause this big explosion? Now, they used to say, well, it was a singularity, and who knows what that is, a singularity. That's a cleverly chosen word. It means some single entity that they haven't the slightest idea what it is, but we'll just call it a singularity because it's not a plurality. It's not two things, it's just one thing. Because if you had two things, a plurality, that means either one came from the other, or you're going to have to explain how two things came into being, and either are distinguished or similar, but they still have their same identity. They still have different identities. So you don't want to go that route. So you don't call it a plurality, you call it a singularity. But then you don't define it. That used to be the way they answered the question. Okay. But then somebody got smart and said, well, the Big Bang had replaced the steady state theory. And the steady state theory was a theory that what you see out there in the cosmos was always here and will always be here. Okay. In other words, it becomes a god to them. It's greater than them because it existed longer than them and will last longer than them and will never disappear. Okay. That's called a steady state. And they, that's hard to explain in itself because everybody knows matter can't create itself. Okay. But so they just dispense with the creation, just said it was always here, and they use infinity as if they can throw around the word infinity, which means never had any beginning and never will have an end. They can throw it out with abandon and make it sound like they're making sense. It's uncanny what they do with infinity, as if they can grasp it and explain it. They can't. Okay. But that would be the only way that you could get out of having God behind it, is to say that the universe itself is infinite. If it's infinite, then you don't need a creator. So that's pretty easy, isn't it? Yeah. And that's how they used to think about the universe, at least around the turn of the 20th century, until somebody came up with the Big Bang idea and tried to give a beginning to the universe, to make it more plausible, to make it more logical for the average man to grasp, because everybody can get on that truck and say, well, yeah, okay, so we know everything has a beginning. I had a beginning, you had a beginning, the books back there had a beginning, so it's natural for the universe to have a beginning. Okay. But of course, once you say that, then you open yourself up to the question of, but did it have its own beginning? Are you telling me that it sort of just became out of nothing all by itself and became this singularity? And so they knew how absurd that path was going to be, because to say that something came from nothing, the average layman, he might not be the smartest guy in the world, but he can at least figure out that you can't get something from nothing. Okay? Can't get something from nothing. And so, this question continually haunted them, even as much as they wanted to make a beginning, to make it plausible for the average man. They knew that they were going to have problems with it, and didn't think it out too far ahead, did they? No, because it doesn't take much acumen to understand that if you have a beginning, you're implying that something had to create it in the beginning to make it what it is. Otherwise, you're stuck with the idea that it came from nothing. All right. And maybe they liked that idea, that it came from nothing. That's what Lawrence Krauss tries to tell us, But then you go and examine what his nothing is, and it's just full of energy. So it's not nothing. Okay. He just likes to use the word because it's sellable. Sells a lot of books that way. And by the way, Lawrence Krauss is in our movie, The Principle. So you'll get to see him and his antics for a good portion of the movie, like about 15 minutes, I think we give him. And that was enough. But he's one of the major spokesmen for this whole cockamamie idea. He was just on Joe Rogan's show, actually 2 years ago, he was there. It's got 2 million hits. And so you can see how persuasive all this stuff is. He talks this highfalutin language. And I'll get back to radiometry in a minute, so just bear with me. I want to give you some background to this, because you have to know the background, the context, before you understand what's happening with radiometry. At any rate, so, they were having problems with getting something from nothing, and so they created this thing called the multiverse, which is basically just like the steady state theory, only you have an never-ending amount of universes. Okay, whereas the steady state theory said there was only one universe, and it was here from time eternity, and it will never end. It's infinite. So now the Big Bangers have the same thing, okay, except they say that there's, an infinite assortment of universes out there instead of one universe. But they're basically saying the same thing as a steady state theorist. Okay, but it sounds more plausible if you wrap it up with a bow, and you say, okay, so our universe is a product of another universe, and that universe was a product of another universe, and that was a product of another universe. So you have this gradation, and it looks like there's time there, okay? Except if you ask them, well, when was the first universe? They say, well, there wasn't a first universe. It's always been this way. They've always been creating universes without end, you see. So again, they end up with the same kind of view as the steady state theorists. So it's really no different, all right? And that's because there's only basically two ways you can answer this question. Either you have eternal matter and energy, or you have eternal God. That's it. There's no other choices, okay? And what do you think the men of the world who hate God, or don't know God, or pretend, let's put it this way, they pretend they don't know God, and they make a lot of money and have a lot of prestige and fame over pretending there is no God and giving us all kinds of fancy theories about where everything came from, what do you think they're going to pick? Yeah, well, they're going to pick eternal matter. Because does eternal matter, is that going to be my judge when I die for my sins? No. No. Eternal matter has no personality. Okay, it has no life. All right. So I'm scot-free. I can sin up the wazoo. And as long as eternal matter is out there and there's no eternal God, hey, I'm free as a bird. I can do whatever I want. Just as long as I don't get caught on this earth and end up in prison, I can do whatever I want. I don't have to answer to anybody. And that's what it's all about, folks. Okay? Those are the reasons, philosophical, psychological reasons why men make the choices that they do. Lawrence Krauss being one of them. He's an out-and-out atheist. And, he laughs at the idea that there's a God. And he will laugh until the day he dies. And then he will stop laughing. I guarantee it. Okay? So, but that's where it all comes from. That you have to know the mentality of the people you're dealing with, why they believe what they believe, and before you can start examining the data, and you see the interpretations they put on it. Okay? So if you want to know the biggest problem with radiometric dating, that's it, right there. It's the psychology, the mentality, the philosophy that the scientist comes to when he examines the evidence. Okay? And what's he going to do when he sees anomalies in his evidence? Like, for example, when they saw Mount St. Helens in 1980, volcanic lava coming down, and they did potassium argon dating on it, and it said it was 3 million years old. When it had just been created about a year before. Okay? What are they going to do with that? Well, that's just an anomaly. We'll figure it out later. Okay? So, whenever you corner them, they'll find a way out. That's the art of science today, basically, in a nutshell. is whenever the other side corners them, they'll think of an excuse. They've been thinking of excuses for the last 100 years or so. Okay. And that's the interesting part, is you wonder what the excuse is going to be now. Okay. Like when I gave the example a few weeks ago of Mary Schweitzer, I think it was University of Colorado, was it, that she worked at? I don't know. My memory doesn't serve me well there, but had an article in Scientific American in December 2010 about the dinosaur bone of a T-Rex that she found that accidentally broke in half. And when she began to investigate what was inside the bone, she found blood cells and blood vessels and collagen and all kinds of organic specimens, okay, that would deteriorate within what, 100 years. Okay, there's no preservation methods except the fact that you might be able to cover it with dirt and keep the oxygen level at a minimum, but there's going to be oxygen down there. Okay, and it's going to deteriorate those organic specimens. So the best you could hope for maybe is 100, 200, let's say 1,000 years that organic specimen would be preserved. Okay, as a round ballpark figure under the best conditions. All right, let's say there was no oxygen down there, it would still deteriorate. All right, they can put stuff in formaldehyde and it still takes a long time, but it still deteriorates. It can only hold a specimen for so long until it just turns to, like, you ever put toilet tissue in a jar with water in it? Yeah, that's what it turns to. Okay, because it takes structure to hold these things together, and that structure breaks down all by itself if there's nothing to replenish it. At any rate, you know, what did they do? So she walks back to her boss at the university, and his name is Jack Horner, and she shows him what she found, and Jack's answer to her was, well, show me that it's not. Show me that it's not organic specimen, or show me something that I can take to the press, because they're going to be asking questions, and explain to them why this is still 65 million years old. Before she even does her investigation. Okay, and then Mary came up with this cockamamie excuse that somehow there was a substance in the bone. I forget, what was it? I forget what she said it was. Something similar to formaldehyde that allowed these organic specimens of blood vessels, collagen, all to be preserved for 65 million years. Okay, so that's, again, the kind of mentality we're dealing with. They have decided that the interpretation cannot be anything close to the biblical record of 6,000 or 7,000 years, when that is the most reasonable. Because let's say the dinosaurs died around the Noachic flood. Say the Noachic flood was around 2500 BC. So that's 2,500 years plus 2,000 years. So we got 4,500 years, tops. Under the best preservation methods, let's say it's buried 10 feet down, and so we don't get any oxygen down there. Okay, we no breakdowns of methane or anything like that, or carbon dioxide, whatever, so that there's no oxygen being produced. You might be able to get something that lasts that long, okay? But nothing close to 65 million years, all right? Everybody knows that. But so the biblical record is the most logical explanation, okay, that this dinosaur specimen, this bone that she found, can't be 65 million years. It can't be 50. It can't be 40 million. It can't be 30 million. It can't be 20. It can't be 10 million. It can't be 1 million. Okay? Everybody knows that. So you're dealing with people that are so entrenched, so determined to give themselves an excuse not to believe the biblical record because of this notion that if they do, then they are faced with God Almighty, who will judge them for their sins. That's what it's all about, again. Okay? As Jesus said in John 3:19, men do not come to the light because the light will expose the darkness within them. Okay? That's why. So let's get to radiometric dating. What's the biggest problem they have, scientifically speaking? Well, you don't know the relationship between the parent element and the daughter element. Okay? That's the biggest problem they have. And that will forever be a problem because there's no solution to it. Okay? Now, what do I mean by that, parent-daughter relationship? Well, let's say you have a bit of potassium, and you know it breaks down to argon. Okay? But in order to know the rate that the argon has decayed, that the potassium has decayed into argon, you need to know the rate. Is it, 1 atom per second, 1 atom every 100 seconds? Well, what is it? And the only way you can measure that rate is if you know how much potassium you started with and how much argon you started with. Okay? Then you can start making some calculations. Because then as you see one decay into the other, if you know where the starting point is, well, sure, you can make some pretty good measurements as to how long that material has been here and how long it's been decaying. All right? But if you don't know the relationship between those two elements, there's no way you can measure with any accuracy whatsoever as to how long that process has been taking place. Okay? Now, they tried, different methods to try to patch that up, isochrons, or they try to go to argon-argon dating to, try to but it's the same problem. They can't get out. It may look sophisticated, but it's the same problem. You don't know what the daughter-parent relationships with argon to argon, okay? Much less potassium to argon, all right? So that's your big problem. And you can read all about that in my book, Scientific Heresies. Okay, I think I spent a long time on that. Anyway, can we get any bearing on the age of the Earth using radioisotopes, or is this a completely useless method? Well, for the same reason, the creationist isn't going to be able to use them either, because he doesn't know the relationship between the parent and daughter. Okay? He also comes with assumptions. All right, that it can't be, billions of years. And so he's going to interpret the evidence in line with that. Okay? So you do have, the same problem is going to persist. And so in that sense, your question is predicting the future. It's really useless. Okay? Because, and I'm only giving you one factor. There's 4 other factors that you have to take into account. I'm just giving you the one that I think is the most troublesome for them. That is the relationship between the parent and daughter element. Okay? But I list the other ones in Scientific Heresies, and you can go read that for yourself. Okay? So, hope that answers your question. All right, so Ben is back. Ben says, are dinosaurs mentioned in the Bible or in the writings of any of the church fathers? Are there any dinosaurs alive today? If not, what caused the dinosaurs to become extinct? Thank you. All right, so, we have what we believe are answers to these questions. Nothing's definitive because we weren't there. Nobody's writing newspaper accounts of what happened when the dinosaurs left. So we're all left to speculation. We might have some good educated guesses as to what happened, but there's a lot that we don't know. We just have to try our best. That's all we can do. Okay. So dinosaurs per se, you don't find the name of T-Rex or Brontosaurus, of course, because all those names were added afterwards, after the Bible was written. As a matter of fact, they don't have Brontosaurus anymore. They chucked that one out, just like they chucked Pluto out. They chucked Brontosaurus out. But Triceratops or T-Rex, we still have those. We have, gosh, probably about 24 different dinosaurs. So they think. Basically, when they do an excavation, they might find 1, 2, 3 bones of a dinosaur, and then they have to extrapolate as to what the rest of the dinosaur may have looked like from this small specimen of bones that they found in their dig. Okay. Sometimes they may get lucky and come up with more bones, but not usually. All right. So like if you go to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., you see in the middle of the dinosaur display, this big, what used to be called a Brontosaurus. That's all man-made. Okay. Not one of those bones there are bones. It's fabricated. But what they might have found was, like, say, the femur of a leg bone, and they figure, well, if the femur was this big, then the other bones attached to it had to be as big, and then the ribs have to be proportional to the femur, and then the tail has to be proportional to the ribs, and the head has to be proportional to all the rest of it, and voila, you get your dinosaur. That's how they make them. Okay. Whether they're correct or not, that's a whole other story. All right. They do their best with what they think they found. Now, in the Bible, we'll have allusions to big creatures, some of which live in the sea, like Behemoth or Leviathan, things like that. And they could be dinosaurs. All right. For the writer to pay so much attention to these creatures in the book of Job and marvel at them because of the size, like he says, his tail is like a tree, as big as a tree, a cedar. The cedars were tall, and that to have a tail that size, the size of a cedar, full-grown cedar, if you've ever seen them in the mountains, that's pretty big. Okay. Now, if the tail is that long, you have to have the body to support that tail, and so that body has to be big. All right. And because a small body obviously could not support a big tail. Okay. It would break the body apart as soon as he swung it. All right. So that's an indication that the Bible itself recognizes these big creatures. So there's, let's say that's our evidence. Now, of course, the Bible's not going to dwell on this because it's not interested in giving us a history of dinosaurs. It's only interested basically in Job and his plight as he's attacked by the devil, and he's being tested by God, and he's got 3 fair weather friends, and that's the plot of the story. Leviathan comes up basically as one of the questions that God asks, and can you create Leviathan, whose tail is as big as a cedar, and blah 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 blah, and gives him his home in the sea and all this stuff. God's trying to show Job that how great God is. So and it works for Job. So the Leviathan becomes an object lesson for Job. So that's all the attention the Bible is going to give to it. But the fact that this is an historical book that happened with historical people, we know their names, we know how old they were, we know where they lived and when they lived. That's history. Okay, so that means Leviathan is history. And Job is supposed to be right around the same time as Noah. So that would tell us that dinosaurs were living at that time. All right. Now, so let's say somebody says, well, how did he fit dinosaurs into the ark if Noah took them into the ark? Well, of course, he's not going to take adult dinosaurs. Okay. There's no T-Rex, adult T-Rex he's going to take into the ark, of course. And just as we say that he didn't have to take 120 species of dogs so that we can now have all the dogs we see roaming the earth, he only basically had to take in one species of dogs. And the fact that in the DNA of this primal dog, or two dogs, we had the variations built into the DNA so that when they reproduced and kept reproducing, and you know how fast they reproduced, okay, and then went to different lands, and the lands affected how the DNA would react with the environment, well, that's how we get all the species of dogs or birds or whatever animal you're talking about. Okay, so basically Noah only had one pair of dogs, so to speak, that he was going to let out at the end. He would only have one pair of dinosaurs, and they would be baby dinosaurs. So how hard would that be to keep? Not hard at all. If they're only going to be there a year, they're not going to grow that much. And they'd be able to fit right through the door that they came in. All right? So that possibly could happen. But then, since the climate changed after the flood quite drastically, if it went down, let's say 10 degrees on average, that's enough to kill a lot of the animals that had lived prior to the flood, a lot of the plants, okay? And certainly all the humans were gone, but the plant and animal life was, a minuscule of what it was before the flood. As a matter of fact, 99% of the fossils are extinct species. We don't have them anymore. So what does that tell you? Well, that tells you that there were a lot more of them, a lot more animals, variety of animals, and a lot more variety of plants than in pre-Noah days than post-Noah days. Okay, so big difference. And if the climate had changed, just by a few degrees, it would vastly affect life on Earth. Doesn't take much. I said 10, probably even 5 degrees. If it had changed that much, it would still affect life on Earth. They would not be able to live in that kind of environment that they had in pre-flood days. All right, where everything was pristine and well, not pristine, but it would certainly be better than post-flood days. Okay. So that would, if the dinosaurs don't have enough plants to eat, or they can't take, they're, warm-blooded and they can't take, any kind of cold weather, and the winters are going to be harsh, not mild, they're going to be harsh, they would die out easily. Just could not survive in that kind of climate. And so you would, and I have a friend who's a paleontologist, and he does digs. He finds dinosaur footprints right alongside human footprints. Okay. So we can imagine that, men used to hunt dinosaurs, and that was a good catch because there's a lot of meat there. That would last for a long time. So that we can imagine that happening, but eventually they died out. Okay, same thing happened with man. He was starting to die out as well after the flood. Before the flood, if you read Genesis 5, you read about the ages of some of these men who were the patriarchs. These are basically the patriarchs that are listed in Genesis 5 are our historical calendar. That's how we know how old the earth is, by looking at the ages of these men, because each of them were a calendar reference point. Okay. But their ages, like, Adam lived to 950 years. Seth was 800 and something. Methuselah was 969. So on and so on. You're up there near the thousands for the pre-flood men. Then after the flood, Noah himself lived to 950. He was 600 when he went into the ark. But right after Noah, you'll read about these ages. They started declining rapidly. 500, 400, 300, 200, and then to Abraham, 175, he lived to. Okay, and then you go down to Joseph, which I think was 110, Joseph was. All right, so you see that the climate and the degradation of nature built into the flood was affecting mankind himself. So if it's affecting mankind, wherein his age is rapidly decreasing when he dies, you can imagine how it's going to affect sensitive creatures like a dinosaur, whose big body is going to take a lot to keep it going, internally and externally. Okay, you can see how they would start deteriorating as well. And in the Bible, whenever mankind is judged for his sin, the animals are always judged at the same time. Because the way God looks at it, man and animals are part and parcel. Okay? So whatever man suffers, the animals are going to suffer. And you'll see that in all the narratives of the Old Testament when animals are included. And whenever man's blessed, the animals are blessed. Okay? So you have the opposite too. But so if we can understand from this, if man is deteriorating and he's been judged and his life is long, well, the same thing's going to happen to all the animals, and especially the dinosaurs, because of how big they are. Okay, so that would be the reason for them becoming extinct. All right, so we have a few minutes left here. Kate says, will you be speaking at an upcoming Gajewski conference? No, I haven't been invited to that. I think Cad Knights is a bit of a doof, but I like the guests he has on, like you. Okay, you're so something. Do you agree with Father Kramer that Francis is not the best? Well, Kate, this is not a science question. Okay, this you need to bring to the Tuesday and Wednesday sessions. Okay, so I'm going to have to, I hate to do this to you, sweetheart, but I have to do this because we got a few more questions here and I don't have that much time left. Hiroshi says, just finished watching 2 episodes of Ancient Astronaut Theory just for the purposes of pleasure. Infotainment, if you like. Okay, Hiroshi, good. Don't believe a word of it, though, okay? Like you said, just for pleasure. Kate, okay, back to Kate. I had to skip this, Kate. Diami says, can you have gas pressure without a container? Well, it depends on what you mean by a container, I would say, okay? Because gravity can be a container in the sense that it can pull the gas inward. Okay, like our atmosphere. That atmosphere is held, to within a 500-mile altitude by the fact that gravity is pulling it down. Okay, because gravity is pulling it down, all right, you're going to have barometric pressure. 29, 30, 31, whatever it is. And they say there's like 15 pounds per square inch on every inch of your body. Okay. And if that pressure wasn't there from air, we'd explode. Okay, that's why they have to wear spacesuits if they go out into space, because there is no gravity pulling air toward the man. And so the man is already built with an internal pressure of 15 pounds per square inch outward, okay, to compensate for the pressure inward, 15 pounds per square inch, so that he can live, normally. Now, if you were to go to the moon, where there is no air pressure, you would explode, literally. All right, so you can have gas pressure without a container, because gravity can basically take the place of the container. All right, a gas in a container would just be a localized form of gas that is going to obey the same principles of pressure and temperature that the atmosphere obeys, okay? But it's going to be more confined because now you have a local container. That's basically the only difference, okay? Mary says, I heard that we can measure or seek black matter's effect on light as it travels through space. Is this true? And if so, how do you explain it? Okay, so Mary, what this entails is that, yeah, I hate to do this, but you have to ask the question, and I think you're talking about dark matter, right? You're not talking about black holes, because that's not matter. Well, it is matter to them, but it's a black hole. That's the nomenclature they use. But when you say black matter, I think you're talking about dark matter. If I'm not correct, let me know. But dark matter is an invention of our illustrious Big Bangers. It's not real, okay? What you heard was a theory someone gave for the passage of light through dark matter, if dark matter existed, okay? So the first thing you have to know is that when they talk about dark matter as if it really exists, okay, they're just fooling themselves, because they have found no evidence of dark matter. All right, that's why they built this Hadron Collider in Europe, the fastest cyclotron in the world, to find dark matter, and they found none. Okay, they've been looking for it ever since somebody said, "Oh, dark matter, that would solve all our problems." Because in the 1970s they saw the galaxies spinning a lot faster than they should. Okay, spiral galaxies. They spin almost like a phonograph record. Not quite. There is variations in there, but you got the outer spirals going at the same speed as the inner spirals. Well, how does that work? That's not following Newton's laws or Einstein's laws. Okay, so the only way that they could explain that was to say, well, there must be more matter there that we can't see, to make the outer spirals go as fast as the inner spirals. All right, but so if you can't see it, you can't detect it, it doesn't emit any light, it doesn't have any other way that we can detect it. Okay, so you assign this name to it called dark matter. But you see what's happening here. In order to support the Newtonian theory and the Einsteinian theory, as opposed to going back to square one and starting all over again, and who wants to do that? They've built up Newton and Einstein for the past, 400 years. So to go back to the drawing board and throw Newton and Einstein overboard, well, it's a lot easier to say that all we have to do is say that there's matter there that we can't see, and that's why these outer spiral arms of the galaxies are spinning faster than the inner spiral arms. All right, very convenient. This is what they do in science today. There's no experimental evidence for it whatsoever. They've been trying to find it, can't find it, but they have to have it. Otherwise, they throw Newton and Einstein overboard, okay? So once they've convinced themselves that dark matter exists in order to hold together their Newtonian universe, all right, then they say, well, what would happen if light went through it? What would the dark matter do? Okay, and so that's where your question is originating from. Okay, so in other words, you need to know what's behind the statements that are being made by these people. Lawrence Krauss, for example, thinks that light is going to be affected by dark matter. Okay, doesn't explain how. He just believes that, well, if it's there, it's like a porthole to the other universe, as far as he understands it. And these other universes are sort of banging against each other, and we can tell it because there's dark matter there, and light's affected by the dark matter, and blah, blah, blah. It's all a bunch of crap is what it is, okay? Don't believe a word of it. They make it up as they go along, especially him. I have absolutely no respect for Lawrence Krauss whatsoever. Though he was in our movie, everything that comes out of his mouth is just a lie, okay? And he has a lot of colleagues that say the same thing, but he's the most boastful, and that's what bothers me the most about him. And of course, he sells a lot of books. He gets 2 million hits on his, interview with Joe Rogan, and everybody's oohing and ahhing, but it's just make it up as you go along. Is basically what he's doing. Okay. All right. So we're nearing the time of the end here. Hiroshi says, anyone in here who's into BBC Horizon PBS Nova docu fandom? Yeah, well, be careful, Hiroshi. All right. Most of what they say is not true. I'm just telling you that. BBC or PBS. When they're covering nature, for example, they'll spend an hour talking about, penguins or pelicans or whatever it is they want. And invariably, within 10 minutes of the show, they're talking about how many years it took for this pelican to evolve into what you see. And, and they'll mention it at least 3-4 times during the show. And so basically it's just propaganda to support evolution. Okay. And that's another big lie that people are being told. Ron says, how could our Catholic educators and clergy so easily abandon the Noachic flood, where there is such overwhelming evidence of a worldwide water catastrophe? Well, Ron, you could probably answer that better than I could. Okay, what did I just say? The reason why they don't want to accept the Noachic flood, because they've already bought into the secular science that they think. See, this is the thing: when you're a Catholic educator and you're funded by secular institutions, and you're competing with secular institutions for students, and you don't want to look stupid, and you're going to look stupid, unfortunately, if you teach 6-day creationism. Can you imagine Notre Dame teaching 6-day creationism? Or Loyola in Chicago, or Dallas Seminary, or whatever. No, because they think that they will look stupid in the eyes of the world, and they won't get any students coming to their college, because these students have already been inundated from TV and books, Lawrence Krauss, you name it, that the creation story is a myth, and that evolution is the only way things work. And so they're not going to get any students. And there goes the money. And there goes their jobs. Okay? So that's the reason why they don't want to do it. We don't live in the 1600s anymore. We live in the 21st century, when men are sophisticated and they have so many instruments that they can go and examine the world and figure out how it all began without God in the picture. And all the Catholic people do now is whatever secular evolutionist says, they bow down to it, give them the obeisance. Yes, you are correct. And then they'll stick God at the end of it or the beginning of it. And they think they've satisfied themselves by saying, well, God's the one who started it. Whatever the evolutionist says, it happened, but God's the one who put it into play. Yeah, right. Okay. See, that's another story they make up as they go along as well. And the reason they don't capitulate to the Bible is because there's no money in it. There's no fame in it. There's no fortune in it. Okay? There's no friends in it. You'll be very lonely if you get a job at a college or university. Okay? That's the way the world is today. Modern science rules the world, basically. And everybody bows to it as like it's a false god that they're worshiping. Okay? That's the reason. So I don't think I need to go on anymore with that. You mentioned Peter's second epistle. It seems like there's a mass delusion. Of course there is. Absolutely. Okay. Jerry says, if I understand the principle correctly, the earth is not in motion. You understand it correctly. If that is what is being stated and proven scientifically, what does that do with video evidence to the contrary? If I am wrong on my understanding of the premise, ignore the question. Well, Jerry, since you mentioned it, I can't ignore it because a lot of people are in the same boat as you. Okay. And that is that you assume that there's video evidence to the contrary. What video evidence? There is none. Okay. What you're thinking of is, excuse me. What you're thinking of is, let's say you have a camera on a satellite and it's taking a picture of the Earth. Let's say it's one of the weather satellites that's above the Earth by 22,242 miles. It's pretty far. Okay. So from that distance, you'd be able to see the whole Earth. Okay. And let's say there's a camera on that satellite. It's taking a moving picture of the Earth. Okay. What are you going to see? Well, the normal, let's say the pre-educated version of what you're going to see is you're going to see the Earth rotating. Okay. So if you watch it for an hour, you're going to see, let's say you're looking at the America and the United States, it's going to shift from one place to the other in an hour. It's going to go 1/24th around its circumference. And you're going to say, I saw the Earth rotating. Okay. That's normal, don't be embarrassed by it. You saw it rotating, but is it rotating? Because the other explanation is that you're rotating, you see. Because if the universe is rotating around a fixed Earth, you're going to be rotating with that universe. Everything in the purview of the universe, including the sun and the stars, are moving together, you see, all as one unit. All right? So you're not going to be able to resist the inertial forces that make everything else move along with the universe. You're going to be pulled right along with it. Okay? And as you're pulled right along with everything else, your camera is going to be moving. Okay? 1/24th in an hour of the total rotation or circumference until you get back to where you started from. Okay? And from that angle, if the Earth is fixed, okay, and you're moving around the Earth, well, it's going to look like the Earth is rotating. Okay. So, people don't think this out, but that's what would have to happen. All right. Okay. So, Dayami says science is only interested in cause and effect. Yes. But if you don't know what the cause is, you have to make something up. okay? Or you give a theory or a hypothesis, okay? We'll give them that much. But see, what happens today is most of these hypotheses and these theories turn into fact for them because they don't have any other answers. And they consider it fact until someone else disproves them. And so it wasn't a fact, was it? No, it was still a theory. It was still a hypothesis because someone came down along the line and disproved them. And this happens about every 50 years in science. Someone will have this brilliant theory, and someone else will come along and say, no, that doesn't work because of so-and-so. And so they create another theory and another theory 50 years or 100 years from that, and so on and so on. That's the way science works. And science can never reach that point where it says, we've reached the end of theories. You see, we now have the definitive answer. Why? Because he's finite. Man is finite. And so he can never exhaust the possibilities of what may be the reason why there's this cause and effect. Okay? Because someone's always going to come up with a better solution. I'm on a board or a blog, I think it is, with 60 physicists. You should see these guys go back and forth with one another. I don't think there's one person within the 60 who agrees with the other. Sometimes somebody will come up with here and John will say, yeah, I agree with that. And then he'll get 12. Well, I disagree with that for the following reasons, blah, blah, blah. I mean, about the simplest things in physics. You would think that, wow, these things have been settled, and they're not. You can imagine what it's like when they get to the more complex theories. Okay? They all disagree with one another. And it's the most amazing thing to watch. I've been with them now for about 5 years or so. And every once in a while, I'll chime in and, I'll get treated like the rest of them. Either, well, I mean, it sounds okay, or, you're totally wrong, whatever. That's the way it happens. So they look for cause and effect, but they can't find the cause and effect sometimes, a lot of times. All right. But they have to have answers, so they fill in the blanks with what they think the cause will be that will support their theory of evolution or their theory of the Big Bang or whatever it is. Okay, you're not going to get a cause developed by someone in a theory that's going to disagree with the Big Bang theory or evolution. They won't allow that in the scientific literature. That's why they call it peer review. Yeah, what peer review means is they want to make sure that you've stayed within the strictures that they've already assigned, and that is you can't go too far to the left or right, which means you can't deny evolution or the Big Bang, and anything in between those two, yeah, you go ahead, write whatever you want. As long as you cross your T's and dot your I's, we'll peer review it for you, and you can get it into our magazine. But don't you dare, say that evolution is wrong, or that Einstein is wrong, or that that there's no Big Bang. Okay, so they're only going to take so many causes and effects, okay, that fit within their little parameters. The rest is, not allowable in their understanding. Okay, don't worry about my phone; it's ringing. Let me see what else we have here. Kirk says, I am teaching creation science class on Wednesday night. Had an excellent question on how people can get their doctorate in the sciences and still be a Christian and believe in creation science. I told her, I don't know. Any suggestions or ideas? I'm going to tell you the same thing, Kirk. I don't know. I don't know where you could go to get a degree in science, believing in. The only ones who may know are those people, Protestants, who work at Creation Research Institute. Contact them, see if they know of any. Okay, I mean, there may be one or two, and if there are, they'll probably be Protestant. You won't find any Catholics doing that today, unfortunately. But you could get a degree, doctor's degree, maybe from one of their institutions, and they'll be nice to you, you know. They're only interested in the science. So, I mean, if that's where her interest lies, then, you know, I would try that. Okay. Now, what you could do also is you could go undercover, you know, just not ever open your mouth about the fact that you believe in a 6-day creation, and go to a secular university and take their biology courses and evolution courses and whatever else they have, paleontology, whatever else they have to offer. Just never open your mouth about what you really believe. Okay, you can do that. But don't make the mistake that Professor von Stenberg made when he worked at the Smithsonian Institution, and just happened to blurt out in an article a casual statement that he thought that intelligent design was possible. He got fired. Okay. If you're going to a secular institution like the Smithsonian Institution, just keep your mouth shut. Okay. That's hard to do, but you could do it. You know, if you really want to know what they think, the best source is to go where they teach it. And of course, you can spend your whole life afterwards, after you get your degree, refuting everything that you everything that you were taught. Okay, so that's another way to do it. So, you know, it depends on what course she wants to take, but that's what I would advise her. Okay. Schweitzer speculated it was the hemoglobin iron that preserved the tissue. That's why I couldn't remember it. Thank you. Hemoglobin's iron. You know, Ron, thank you, Ron. Ron put 3 smiley faces after that one. Yeah, that's right, Ron. I believe that too. Matthew says, would you be willing to debate Father Robinson? Oh, yes, anytime. Anytime, Matthew. You tell him that I said so. As a matter of fact, I've already invited him to debate. He's just ignored me. So, yeah, he's a strange bird. He is so convinced of his position that he treats me with the greatest disrespect that I've ever witnessed from any of my associates in these fields. I mean, it's just, and as a matter of fact, he was on a radio program in Australia. He's from Australia. And he was I made the remark that Father Robinson's book, in his chapter on geocentrism, only mentions one scientific so-called proof of heliocentrism, and that was stellar parallax. That's it. For a man who goes around and preaches the gospel as if it's dropped from heaven that geocentrism isn't true, and writes a book about it, has it published, disseminates it all over the place, and you turn to the book and he has one example, one possible objection to geocentrism, stellar parallax. That alone is, you know, it's like, you know, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And then when he's covering parallax, he totally avoids the geocentric explanation for parallax. So you don't have to believe it, Father, but if you're going to present evidence that you say is the definitive evidence that geocentrism is true, the least you should do is, well, let's see what they say about parallax. Not a word, not one word. Okay. And I pointed this out to him. I said, what kind of scientist are you? Okay. At least give the people both sides of the story. Let them make their decision. And stop this idea that, you have the definitive answer to debunk geocentrism. And in the geocentric explanation for parallax, it's just the reverse of heliocentric, as you would expect, okay? Because everything is relative, all right? So instead of the Earth creating this angle, to the stars because it goes around the sun, you have the sun going around the Earth that's creating the different angles that you look at the stars. And you're going to see the same parallax that you see in the heliocentric version, okay? And it's very simple. As a matter of fact, I have videos of it that he could have seen. And I even offered him the videos in a letter I wrote to him. But no. And he hasn't modified his book. He hasn't, tried to make any amends at all. Because what I believe is that he didn't even know that there was a geocentric answer to stellar parallax. He hadn't even studied the issue far enough to even become familiar with the fact that there was a geocentric explanation to parallax. And so he was stunned when I showed him that there was one. Okay. And then he's on this radio program in Australia, and he says, so now he's familiar with the fact that there's a geocentric explanation, okay, because I taught him that there was one. And so he gets on this program and he says, well, you should see the geocentric explanation of parallax. They jerry-rigged the universe. I almost about fell off my chair when I heard this man say that. With such sincerity, too. It was just amazing to watch. So instead of calling it, what it was, it's just a reverse of the heliocentric. Instead of having the Earth move, you have the sun and stars move, which creates the same angle. He says, well, they jerry-rigged the universe, without explaining what he meant by jerry-rig. So he just left that impression to his audience. Oh, I see. These guys are dishonest. They fudge it and they make up things and all this stuff. That's the kind of impression he wanted to leave. And this is from a priest, no less. Okay? A priest who's sworn to tell the truth and not slight anyone that might have an objection to what he deems as truth. So, that's why I say I have very little respect for the man. And then I go into the rest of his book and I show all the flaws of that. Now, the philosophy part of his book, the first 6 chapters, they're great. Absolutely great. I love the way he deals with philosophy and explains it to people. So it's not like I have this vendetta against the good old father, because I extol it. And as a matter of fact, when I tell people about his book, first 6 chapters, some of the best you'll ever read on philosophy, because he has a good way of explaining it to people. The last chapters, I would take each page with a grain of salt. All right. And if you want to know more, I'll be glad to tell you more. All right. So anyway, there's a long history between me and him, letter writing back. The first time I objected to this, he wrote back to me and basically said I was crazy. Okay. So, in so many words, I was crazy to believe in geocentrism. All right. Now, he doesn't believe in evolution. So there's a strange animal. All right. So he's against the tide of all the Catholic intellectuals out there that teach in the universities that believe in evolution. The father says, well, the science doesn't show that evolution is true. Okay. Well, bravo, Father. Great. But have you studied the science about geocentrism? Have you really studied it? Or did you just sort of, read a few pages and figure, yeah, okay, I'll accept that and write about it. And that's why you only have parallax as the so-called proof in your book. Okay, so none of the other stuff, and you people know how big of a topic this is. It took me 16 years to write about it, and I've got 12 editions to Galileo Was Wrong, because I find out something new almost every year about the issue. So you can see how complicated it can get. At any rate, I hope that answers your question. If you want to get Father Robinson to debate, I'll be glad to debate him anytime, anywhere. And I don't want to be, macho about it, bravado. I'm just saying, I've had it up to here with Father Robinson. And if he gives me the opportunity to debate him, I'm going to put the final nail in the coffin on that one, believe me. Ron says, from my experience, is we must learn the prevailing science and philosophy to earn the secular degree and gain the credit it affords. But keep creation ideas to yourself and conduct self-directed creation studies for your own development. Open declaration of creationist ideas not tolerated. Thank you, Ron. He said exactly what I said as well. All right, so that is the end. We are at 8:30. So Nick joined. Hi, Nick. Nick is my son and budding creationist and geocentrist, by the way. All right, so we're going to end this session here tonight. Thank you for joining me. Join me again next Thursday, which would be what, the 23rd of October? Thursday, 7 p.m. to 8 or so p.m. for another session of the Open Question Program. And for those of you who want to ask theological questions, I will be on board here at the Facebook of Robert Sungenis. And that will occur on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 7 to 8. So Kate, you can bring your question back then, okay? Sorry to dish you tonight, but I had to in order to get to the other questions. At any rate, God bless you all, and keep studying. Bye-bye.